when someone does decide to transition, it is usually the very last decision they can make. They don't
Mm.
make it lightly. It's not a high school contagion. It's none of that. This was the last decision that I could make as David and survive. Everything else I had tried.
Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. We get curious about all things gender, sex, and sexuality, as well as relationships, feminism, the inclusive kind, neurodivergence, disability, kink, mental health, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. If you appreciate this podcast and want to support us, you can visit our website, 50shadesofgender.com, as in FIFTY, to make a donation, join our community, find out more about our gender diversity and allyship workshops and courses, and how to contribute your gender story to the Anthology of Hope, for which we are now accepting submissions. Visit 50shadesofgender.com/hope for more information. Now, join us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance, and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I am a queer woman, and my pronouns are she and they. In this episode, I have a conversation with Deanna Marie Jones, a speaker, consultant, and LGBTQ+ advocate with a history in corporate technology. Deanna's pronouns are she and her, and she is a transgender woman. Find out what that means to Deanna in this episode. We also talk about the positive evolution of the job industry, what good leadership looks like, the importance of finding community, and what allies can do to help. It was recorded on the 26th of June 2025. Now let's get into the episode. Hello and welcome. What's your name?
My name is Deanna Marie Jones. I
Hello,
am from the
Deanna.
United States, and I was born and raised in North Carolina, here in
Ah,
the United States, in the South.
mm-hmm.
Some
Mm-hmm.
people might pick up on the accent a little bit. I know people are enjoying my accent when they say, repeat that word again, if I say truck or something like that. So we tend to draw out words here.
Uh-huh. I like that. Well, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, the label you gave me for yourself was trans woman. So yeah, I would love to start with what would I love to start with?
You want to
Yeah,
start with when I was born?
we can start there. Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
start there because there was a very key moment when I was born.
Uh-huh.
Before I was born, I thought I would be something beautiful and walk in the Garden of Eden. No, I didn't really think that because I couldn't think. It's more of a figure of speech. But when I was born, the doctor held me up and taking all of his numerous years of medical training, looked at one thing and said, "It's a boy," and that's what I was declared. I wasn't asked, not that I should have been at that time, but that was the declaration. And I was born in '64, and as it still is today, but much more so even back then, there's one of two boxes. I think we do generally recognize intersex a lot more now, but I was put in one of two boxes, and I was put in the boy box. And my parents were so happy because they had two girls, and I was expected to be another girl, but they were pleasantly surprised because they finally had their son. And that's a
Mm,
lot to put on someone, but
it is.
I was the son, the man, the new man of the house. And as I continued to grow up, around 4, I have memories of being 4 or 5. And I can remember like having this desire to not be a boy. I don't know where it came from. And this is what I tell a lot of people. It doesn't matter if there's literature out there, it doesn't matter if it's talked about in school. Transgender people will have thoughts of this, usually at a very early age. Not always, because there's not just one way to do this.
Mhm.
But I started feeling like I wanted to wear what my sisters were wearing. I wanted to be more like them. And this feeling just kept growing. I never saw a movie, I never read a book. Of course, the teacher never talked about it. I got into first grade in 1970, 71, and it was just there. And I felt, I started to feel like something was just very off but I had to keep it hidden. And the way I always describe it is everybody else around me was drinking this ice water, and I was drinking like sour lemon water. I just couldn't feel at home with myself.
Mm.
And I would go into the bathroom, and sometimes I'd pull out my sister's clothes, and we're talking about, and I'm 6 and 7 now, and I would put them on and look in the mirror, and I could just see something different, something that was just a lot more pretty, something that was more flower-like. And it didn't take long before that started manifesting itself a little bit in my behavior. I would get teased. My old name was David. A lot of people don't like to say that, and that's fine. But I
Mm.
do say I was David, and they'd say David is a fairy, David's a girly girl, and they just kept teasing me. And it
Mm.
didn't take me long to realize that when that doctor held me up, he made 1,000 decisions for me that really weren't mine.
Mm.
My parents, they painted the room dark blue. I remember not getting very much light and thinking, I wish my room were yellow or something like that. And would I like to fish? Would I like to play sports, football, all those sorts of things? I didn't really want to, but I was in this box, so I was sort of forced to. And it becomes like this negative feedback loop because in the sports team, the coach would say, David, you run like a girl, and all of those things. And the girls, it seemed, had so many more choices about their decisions. But my dad really wanted a tough boy. He encouraged me
Mm.
to fight. If I cried, which I did, he would say, Stop crying, or I'll put you in one of your sister's dresses. It's a threat. And I would think, Please. But
Yeah.
I wasn't really allowed, to show a lot of emotion because I was supposed to
Mm.
be tough. And I just continued that way. I remember I was always attracted to girls, but I also wanted to be them. So people ask me, they say, Oh, well, what did you think when you looked at a girl? And I said, I thought two things. One, she's very pretty. I would like to be with her. And two, I wish I were her. Even in high school, I can remember when we had the big dance, the prom. I wanted to wear the dress, but that was not an option. I think that would have been a very uncomfortable moment if I had shown up at my date's house wearing a dress. So I wear the
Mm.
suit. I continue in my life, and I just become more miserable, but I keep doing things that I think will cure me, things that will make me a man. I lower my voice intentionally because I had a high pitched voice.
Mm.
I always like to think that if we believe in a God and they were making me, they said, Oh, I'm going to make this one a girl, but she's going to figure it out on her own. And it did. It took me 56 years. But as I
Wow.
continued through life, I got married, wore the tux, I had children, but life became harder and harder because there was this secret, and it made me feel like a deviant, made me feel like I am really messed up. And so the more I suppressed it, the unhealthier my life became. I began to drink a lot. I gained 150 pounds. I mean, I was overweight. I had a job that I didn't like at all. I had to wear a suit in the beginning, but later on I didn't. But I was regulated to a crawl space underneath my house just to be myself, if but for a moment, to put
Mm.
on those clothes that I had purchased, and I could just breathe. It was like a whole calmness went over me, and it literally was a crawl space in my house, and I was in my 50s, overweight, drinking 6 or 7 bourbons a night. And it came to me that I was going to die in my 60s, at a very early age in my 60s, because I was so unhealthy. The doctor was like, you got to change your lifestyle. And, if you're in a crawl space or a hole anywhere, you have two choices. You can crawl out, or you can just lay down and let the dirt just cover you up. And
Mm.
I made the decision to crawl out. That's all I can say is I crawled out. I got therapy. It took a few therapists though, the
Mm.
first therapist says, "You don't want to be a woman, do you?" And okay, so I got two therapists, and it took me a while, but I reached someone who specialized in gender therapy. And I was age 54, and she said, "Deanna, you are transgender. This is not going to go away. This is not a choice that you made." And, I told her, I said, I knew it wasn't a choice because I would say so many times if somebody came along and said, "Deanna, we're going to cut 3 or 4 of your fingers off and this will go away," I would have held out my hand so quickly because it was torture. It's
Mm.
torture to know there's this other life that you're driven to lead, this identity that you have to cover up. And I couldn't do it anymore.
Mm.
So I decided then to start transitioning. And that's when
Mm.
the nuclear bomb went off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
That's a whole other journey, isn't it? When you start
well, yeah, it,
transitioning.
it was. As I told my wife, and she was like, "Leave, get out of the house."
Mm.
I was forced to move out. I had 3 kids. I had 2 daughters and a son in the middle. My wife was very angry. She was very. We were both very much in love with one another, and I told her, I said, I'm not going to make it as David anymore. I just can't. You won't have me that much longer. But she
Mm.
just really didn't even understand, even though she's a sociology and gender studies professor at a college down the road. It was just like she taught this stuff, but she did not appreciate it from me. And I
It's
realized
different when it's your own experience, isn't it?
exactly. And I realized
Yeah.
I took away her old age, our old age that we had planned. But
Mm.
again, I would not have made it at
Yeah.
all. And it was very tough. A lot of she got had the kids get very angry at me, and they were angry at me because I was kind of fun dad, and all of a sudden, I changed my identity. So I have
Mm.
not spoken to my children probably in 2 or 3 years due to
Mm.
just this alone. And
Gosh.
it's been very hard, but
Mm.
there's a happy story to the end. I got married a year ago to a
Yay.
woman who was a nurse here, and we have our own Durham, which is close to me, in Duke Chapel. We got married there. It was the wedding of my dreams, and she
Oh.
has two boys, and they love me so unconditionally,
Mm.
and it's truly amazing. And
Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
that was a long answer, I do realize, but that's my story. At least we can have a baseline that we start from, and
Yeah.
tell you about anything else that was a part of my life during that time, like work.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that just came to me was, do you know what did it? What was the moment where you thought, "I'm gonna crawl out of this space and be, in the world and live my life?"
It
Do you
was
know what
just
did
the
it?
moment that I knew that I had probably less than 6 or 7 years to live. We know a lot about what causes longevity and what shortens it
Mm.
now. And I was doing all the wrong things. I wasn't sleeping, so drinking heavily. I just knew that. I guess it was different at 20 and 30 because you think you have so many decades left. And when I got in my 50s, I just realized that it would probably be less than 10 years and I would probably be gone
Mm.
from all of this. All of my health indicators were all in the wrong place. So it was that moment. It was
Mm.
that moment that I realized I had to do something or just go ahead and die. And I just decided that, yeah, I'm going to really start looking at this and stop thinking about it in a way of deviance, because that's what a lot of us think,
Mm.
especially at the beginning, or now not so much, but maybe now we're returning to that. But it's very, very hard. And I will say this to people who kind of have doubts about someone transitioning. When someone does decide to transition, it is usually the very last decision they can make. They don't
Mm.
make it lightly. It's not a high school contagion. It's none of that. This was the last decision that I could make as David, and survive.
Mm.
Everything else I had tried. How many times I burned my clothes, how many times I just wanted to put it behind me, but 2 days later the feeling would show up. So yes,
Mm.
I would say it was just that the knowledge that you sort of start to attain in your late 50s, and that is that, oh wow, more than half of my life is gone. Uh,
Mm.
so that kind
Yeah,
of,
it seems like a real turning point, doesn't it? I think maybe it's
it
just that
is.
age of 50 because it's like half a century. I passed that
Yes,
point a few years ago, and I'm a bit
exactly.
like, "Oh my goodness, what is wow." It
Yeah, and
makes you think about stuff.
it literally does start coming quick when you get
Yeah,
in your 40s. It's, oh
yeah.
my gosh, and, I try and tell young kids, I said, "You don't realize time moves in a different way as you get older," and,
Mhm,
that was 6 years ago. I would
mhm,
say I I transitioned.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned you've had some really beautiful and wonderful things happen. You met a new person in your life, and also you had difficulties with your family. What has the rest of your transition been like? I mean, how did you navigate it? You had to obviously, I think, look into things, and I mean, your first therapist sounds like they should find a different career, but
Yes.
anyway. Yeah,
It was a
but
he, and yes,
yeah,
he should, or at least not counsel anybody
yeah,
on, gender issues.
exactly.
It was the absolute worst time in my life,
Mm,
hands down. I've talked to some other people who got divorced or separated around the same time I did, which I left the house in November of 2019. And we all know what happened, in 2020. It was COVID.
mm,
And here I am just coming into myself, and I want to go out and meet with other women. I do also identify as a trans lesbian. I've always been attracted to women. A lot of people would say, "Oh, so you like men now?" And I'd have to explain that's two different things: orientation and identity.
mhm,
A good way I've always found that people that resonates with them is who you go to bed with is orientation, and who you go to bed as is
mhm,
identity.
mhm,
And I wanted to get out, to go to these meetup groups, and of course it was 2020, and I had to learn to play pickleball, but it was like everything got shut down, and I was in my bachelorette apartment, which doesn't is not nearly as sexy as it sounds. I was all alone. I had the pictures of the kids, and it was. I just remember thinking, there were no kids to run in and yell pancakes, daddy, and jump on the bed. And it
mm,
was awful. It was truly an awful time. And
mm,
any divorce is hard. And I'm not meaning to say that I had any harder, but my transitioning was not the hardest thing. It was the divorce. It got very ugly. We had said we
mm,
wouldn't get lawyers, and then I started getting letters from a lawyer, and it just we spent way too much money on lawyers, and
mm,
it was tough. It was very, very tough. But the one, I would say, one of the good spots was work. I worked at a company that's a California tech company, Cisco Systems, and they are based out of California, which is on the West Coast, and they were very accepting. I think they did a great job with my transition. They held a meeting with my team that I was not invited to, which was fine. And then they just kind of took them through what is, at that time, well, even still today, most people didn't know a transgender person. Uh,
mm.
so they kind of trained them. And about 20 minutes into the meeting, I'm getting these texts like, I support you. I
Aw,
love you. And I was just bawling like a baby. I mean, I was like, oh
yeah,
my gosh. So work was good. The employer matters a lot. Whenever I get together in a support group with other transgender folk, we generally talk about the loss, and there's loss in family, there's loss in work, and fortunately, my job was understanding, and I remained there for another 6 years. Some of the other more difficult parts, my sisters did not accept me. I have a
mm,
relationship with them, but it's much more strained. My father has passed on. My mom is in an assisted living home, and she's probably my biggest supporter. She
aw,
carries me around the assisted living home and says, "This is my daughter, Deanna," and that just it's like, Mom, way to go.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah. Interesting how mixed the reactions have been from your direct family. Yeah.
Yes,
Gosh.
it is, but the friendships I have made, I have best girlfriends now, and they were in my wedding, but a lot of people, I think it was the people that known me for the longest, it was just the hardest for. When you transition late in life, it's not that it's any harder than anyone else, but you have built this entire life as this one person.
Mm,
And those people who've known you your whole life really feel like the carpet kind of got pulled out from under them.
mm,
And I'd tell them I'm still me,
mm,
but they just have a very hard time with that. But not my
mm.
mom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's really lovely. Yeah. I
thank you.
think it goes to show just how entangled all these things like identity, these facets of identity, like if your ex-partner saw herself as a straight woman, then I think it's like it's not just about not accepting someone, or it's I think it feels like maybe a threat to a person's identity because they have to change the map of the world that they've got, and it's obviously a big
Exactly.
thing. it,
Yes.
it is a big thing, and also like you say, you're still you,
Yeah.
but at the same
But
time it seems like, and it is in ways, I'm sure, but yeah, this massive deal. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Mm,
did get to a place where I understood that. I can't make her a lesbian. I cannot do
yeah.
that.
Mm,
And that was fine. It was just the revenge that
mm,
she sought against me that, using the kids, that's what got to
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
That I thought was unnecessary. But
Yeah.
again, I think she did feel like she needed to get revenge on me for what
Mm,
I had done. Yeah, we haven't talked in 2 or 3 years, so
mm,
it's yeah, I understand, but I just and there are experiences
mm,
across the spectrum with transgender women. Some of
yeah.
their partners do stay with them,
Yeah.
and then some do not, but they have a friendly relationship. It's not often that it's this anger filled, which
Mm,
saddens me to a great extent. But
mhm.
I may just have to wait a few more years on that. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I visited your website, and you work in corporate, and the word leadership came up. And I thought, looking at the state of affairs in the world, what do you feel that real leadership would look like? It's obviously very different of what is happening at the moment.
Yes, it is. Well, I spent about 33 years working in corporate jobs, and I gained a lot of experience. There were, projects that I helped to lead. I worked as in sales, and then I worked in sales operations. And I think, based upon my experience, a true leader is someone who not just manages other people. We get caught up in that word, like I'm your manager. At the company I worked at, a lot of times I felt like the C-suite was all very up to date on culture and all of their issues, whereas a line manager, that's 90% of my interaction, and they're more directing you, and they kind of forget that they need to inspire you. So a real leader takes the culture, if it's a good culture, and inspires their employees. A good leader helps their employees find their gifts and then help grow those gifts. Because if somebody does have a gift, if somebody is able to do something well, or it's something they really enjoy doing, then leaders should help that person find a way to do that at their job. Otherwise, they're going to be miserable. Employee engagement, it just continues to drop. And I don't know what it is. I think it's globally. I know it is in the US, and everybody's complaining about millennials and Gen Zers, but I think they're the first generation to say, I don't really like this, and I'm going to show you I don't like it. Whereas
Mm,
my generation and Gen X, I happen to be the last year of the baby boomers, but we just did what we didn't like because that's what we were told we needed to do.
Mhm.
And I have so much hope for the future because I think these younger people in in the generational workforce are pushing back, and they are disengaged. And it's not because they're lazy at all. It's because somebody hasn't found what their passion is or their gift. We have to be more than cogs in a wheel. You know, nothing makes me angrier right now than leaders saying, you need to be back in the office 5 days a week, 8 to 5, and we haven't given them a good reason to be sitting their butts in a chair 8 hours
Exactly.
a day.
Yeah.
We've not given them a reason for that other than we can look at them and say, oh, yes, they're sitting in the chair. But if you ever saw Office Space, you know, I could sit at a chair and do nothing all day, especially in front of a computer. I don't understand because every worker has an output that they are
Mm.
responsible for. And when we start telling them we don't trust you, then you're sending a message to them that they are internalizing. And good leaders don't do that. They trust their workforce to get the job done. Now, if they're not doing
Yeah.
the work, that's a separate conversation.
Mm.
But you can do the work anywhere. We all know that. This is my
Mm.
first podcast, by the way, across the pond. I'm very
Ah.
excited about that.
I
Speaking of
see.
working anywhere,
Oh,
uh,
nice. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, yeah, the whole work education, every like all the systems are changing and need to change, really. There's a lot of
they
change
really
that is
do. Yeah,
required in so many ways. But yeah, I agree with you that young people are a bit like, hang on a minute, this is not
exactly.
feeling good to me. I mean, I feel like I'm a Gen Xer, but I feel like I've always been in that kind of place. I've tried it and I've done it and I've worked
Yeah,
in agencies and all that stuff, and I'm just like, no, no.
yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I get that, and I was just kind of like, ugh, yeah.
Mm,
Last year, I knew I wasn't doing my passion. I knew that I had something to tell other people, and I had a way to do it. And I wasn't serving myself by continuing to stay in a job where I did Excel spreadsheets. Uh,
mm,
that's not my gift at all. You know, people who could do it, I thought were wizards, or maybe they took college classes that they became so much more self-sufficient at all those
mm,
macro analysis and things like that that I just had a hard time with.
mm,
And I made the decision to leave my company after 25 years to go in business for myself.
mhm,
And if I could, I'll tell you the genesis of how that came about. After I transitioned, I just became this different person. I mean, I
mhm,
was really hidden. I wasn't a good employee. I didn't volunteer for things. I just wanted to get through the day. And then I became someone different. Like I could not meet enough people as Deanna because suddenly the secret is no more and I don't have to hide anything from anybody. And my body and my brain are now aligned for the first time. And
mm,
I am just, you know, I'm wide open. And so I started joining things and I went to an LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce here in the Raleigh Durham area. Didn't know anybody. And I was getting ready to leave. And somebody came up to me and they said, tell me about yourself. And I'd always dreaded that question because, you know, that's an interview question that we got a
yeah,
lot in the 80s and 90s. And you're kind of like, I don't know what to say.
yeah,
And I would lie a lot because I had to create a history for people. You know, I played on the football team. I was in, you know, I'm a go getter and all those sorts of things that interviewers like to hear. But after I transitioned, I just wanted to tell this person, this man, the truth. And I was like, I just
mm,
told him everything about myself. And then he told me about his the things that he is doing and his history, and it was just a true connection. And I found out later that was the president of the chamber, and he inspired me so much that I am now the president of that chamber. And
mhm,
he asked me to go speak somewhere and just kind of tell my story at a chamber event. It was a Raleigh chamber event, and I told my story, and I had a line of people, and this was in 2022. And at that time, you know, the transitioning in the workplace was really becoming, I think, an issue for a lot of people because a lot of people were beginning to come out as transgender. And
mm,
so employers came up to me and said, "What do I do? I've got a transgender employee, or I've got a child." And it was the president who said, "Deanna, I think you could have a business here and go out and talk about this." And I
Mm.
started it, and I did a little bit here and a little bit there. And then I just realized in last year in October, they had a layoff at Cisco, and I raised my hand, and they were gracious enough to take me in the layoff. So I had a little bit of a separation package, and I'm just full on in this business of consulting and going out and talking to companies about my experience, about ways that you can lead your employees, about inclusion and, yes, diversity. I'm finding here in the States that I'm getting booked a lot more because we're starting to see a little bit of a backlash against the backlash. We
Mm.
all know there was a DEI backlash, but
Mm.
companies are starting to realize that, especially with their younger generations, they want a diverse and inclusive workspace. I call this the last gasp of this generation, but it's
Mhm.
so, I would say, the antithesis of what young people really want in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so that's how I started my business. And I go out and I speak when I can, and I get on podcasts, great podcasts like this one, to tell my story and just help people understand.
Mm.
This is what happens. We're not trying to fool anybody. I'm not trying to recruit anybody to be transgender. All I want to do is live my life. And we
Mm.
can talk about this a little bit. It was tough over here when the
Mm.
president was elected. It was very tough
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
I Last year, I went to the vice president reception. I went to a White House reception, and so I have a picture of me and Kamala. And it's so funny. It's not funny, actually. It's kind of tragic. But January
Mm.
20th, I was on the White House email list, and I get an email from the president basically saying, "You don't exist. There's two
Mm.
genders, and they're immutable." And I was like, "Wow, that was a switch." And
Mm.
it was constant. The constant attacks on me, on my community, did get to me after a while. And I was thinking about pivoting to different things, like talking about different things in the workplace. But I realize now we have to we have to be firm. We have to double down on what it is that we think is right. We can't shy away from this, especially now.
Mm.
And at least here in the States, a lot of companies are starting to figure that out. I mean, in 5 years from now, Esther, it's 75% of the population will be millennials and Gen Zers, and then add on another 5% for Gen Alpha. And what are you going to do? Where are you going to get your employees from? I mean, are you
Mm.
going to, will you have railed against diversity for the last 5 years and suddenly you think they want to come work for you? There's a cost to that. Target
Yeah.
here has learned that. They completely backed off of diversity, and there was a big boycott, and it had an effect
Good.
on Target. Exactly. And I just think, companies are making a mistake if they're just listening to everything this guy's saying, or they think that it's in vogue now to be anti DEI. But
Mhm.
in five
Yeah.
years, you're not going to have Gen Xers, or very many of them, and you'll have even fewer baby boomers that are even in the workplace. So,
That is such a good point, actually. I hadn't thought of that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's why it can't stay that way. Something has to change because, like you say, the young people are not having any of it.
you're
So,
right. They
yeah.
aren't.
Yeah.
And Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But I
Yeah. Yeah.
can't be anything but myself.
Yeah.
Again, I had that moment there where I thought maybe I should change what I speak about, and I don't
Mm.
know everybody's. And then I was like, no, it was I've got to be out there and be this voice, whether it's popular or not. And
Mhm.
so far, it's really started to pick back up, and I'm
That's good
happy
to
to see
know.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean for other people who are struggling, which, in
Yes.
the community are a lot, What helped you get through this time, and how did you find, hope and support and everything like that?
It was that's a great question, and I encourage any listeners out there that feel like they may not have a community, and I know this is true in the UK, just like it is in the US. There's a lot of noise going around, or whether this is valid or not. I assure you, as I have before, it is valid. And one of the most important things you can do is find a community. I am not that religious a person, but after I transitioned, I knew I had to find a community that would support me. And the United Church of Christ here in the United States, they always have pride flags. And that was a
Mhm.
signal to me that I was going to be accepted there. And I joined, and I had one of the most wonderful communities. I still do,
Mhm.
but that was really my first community. And then I found support groups, and then eventually I found, just other friends, other people who are allies in our chamber. We have a lot of allies. We depend on allies, but you have to find a community because you cannot go it alone, or it's very hard to do that.
Mhm.
And I have so much wider of a network of support and friendship than I ever had in my previous life. And I find a lot of joy and the ability to push through in my communities I'm in, whether it's a business, an LGBTQ business chamber, a church, a support group, whether you take up pickleball, which is still very much alive here. I don't know how it is there, but anything just so you can be around other people who support you. And those people are out there. There are plenty of people. I'm in North Carolina, which is considered a red state. But I find, especially in the cities, now, if I were in rural North Carolina, it'd be much harder for me. I would
Mhm.
have to move to a city. Finding support for the LGBTQ plus community in very rural areas is very difficult. And most
Mhm.
people do go to the cities. And I go to New York. I travel there sometimes, and I just love it. I mean, I think, wow, I could move here, but then I look at what the costs are, and maybe I can't. But I can enjoy it every now and then. But I just really want to hone in on that. Please find your community of support wherever they are. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any words of advice as well for allies or people who want to be good allies and what they can do?
Yeah, I love that question when I get it, because I think there are a lot of people who do support our community and don't know exactly what to do. And to
Mm.
be a good ally is someone who won't just like complain with you. There's some people who say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how you stand it. It's just so awful and everything they're doing." And I'm just nodding. But an ally jumps in and takes action. I mean, if you're on a ship that's being attacked, you want an ally there fighting with you. And for allies, I encourage you to listen, to accept when you may make a mistake, especially with the transgender or non-binary community. Admit it and just move on and say, I will do better next time. Because I had a lot of people who just profusely would apologize, but
Mm.
just listen to our story, and we'll be glad to listen to your story. But for an ally in a workplace, offer to go to an event or an employee resource group with them that may be LGBTQ centered, or it may just be a workplace function. At the beginning of my transition, as outgoing as I am now, it was very hard because I was a little bit nervous, and I had people say, "Hey, I'll go with you." And that meant a lot to me.
Mm.
Show up for Allied can just showing up for the community, taking part in protests if need be. We need our allies. We're only transgender people are only like 0.6, and it's probably a little higher now. 0.6 or 7% of the population. We can't fight this alone. So we need people that will be in the streets marching with us, that are supporting us, that are writing their government officials. And there are people who are not just going along with whatever the current trend is. And
Mhm.
I've seen some allies fall by the wayside. Some companies have, and that's fine. But the true allies, the true supporters, stay with you even if it's difficult,
Mm.
and it can be difficult. But yeah, we do. We have 20% of our chamber is just allied companies, and they
Mm.
stay and they fight with us and they support us and they help us with the events, and that's just magic for us. It really is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you don't ask questions. I know, there's the CAS report in the UK, and a lot of transgender people are getting hit with those questions about that. Well, what do you think? Well, of course, a transgender person who has felt this and lived with it knows that so much of that report is false. That had suicidal ideation and things like that, and so
Mm.
I caution people to start challenging transgender people on those types of things that come out, because you can, if you want to have a conversation or ask a question about it, do it in a way that you makes us feel like you really want to understand it, not be attacked by it. And well-meaning people will do that to me all the time, like, oh, why do you think about Trump's stance that y'all don't exist or taken out of the military? Of course we don't agree with that, and I don't think they would either. It doesn't make any sense. We have people serving on the front lines willing to risk their life, and there's a
Mm.
policy out there that's pulling them out. I mean, I'm not here to support every anti-trans or argue with every anti-trans view out there. So
Mm.
I caution allies to be careful about trying to challenge transgender people. It's
Mm.
very much a part of our identity. I'll just for a minute or so speak about the science of this. That they're realizing more and more than the science of this. They've taken brains from transgender identified people and people that are cisgender of one gender or another, one biological sex or another, and they're finding the brain similar. In other words, my brain may be more similar to a woman's than it is a man's.
Mm.
They're discovering that of course the genitalia develops in the first half of the pregnancy, but the identity develops in the second half, and that can depend on the
Yeah.
amount of hormones that are released. There are lots of
Yes.
factors.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of science that I think that will continue to come out about this, but nobody will ever tell me I wasn't born with this because it was too painful to live with. And
Mm.
I know I was born with this. You don't come up with something like that at 4 years old. So
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. That's interesting actually, because I did find an article about exactly what you're talking about, the development of the fetus. Yeah. I'll find it
yeah.
and put it
I'm going to tell you
in the
they're
show
different. They're
notes.
two different
Yeah.
developmental stages of a pregnancy.
Mm.
And I could have maybe not got enough testosterone. I don't know the exact answer. I just know when I came out, as far back as I can remember, this is how I felt. And it was very, very real to me.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I liked what you said about the advice for allies to not be
yeah.
like, "So,
Yeah.
how does it feel to be in this complete shit show of a world?" Basically, it's like, "Well, not very good, obviously."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe
How would
come
you
up with a
think
more original
it was?
question. And
Yeah.
also, like, it's the importance, I think, of, I mean, lots of people mean well, and that's fair enough. But
It
also,
is.
I think there are things that we need to educate ourselves about before we then instigate a conversation about, because it is stuff that it's almost like asking people to really go into deep, painful subjects.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, yeah. And it's like we almost have to relate it back to, like, how about if you went through a painful divorce and every time you saw someone, they were like, "So what was that like?" It's like, well,
Good
I
point.
kind of don't want to talk about it right now, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. Yeah. And I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah. If people can
No,
relate it more to an experience that they might,
you're
yeah.
right. And I'm a
Yeah.
huge advocate of storytelling, and that's one of the
Yeah.
things that I help teach. I've been in story competitions. I tell stories at a group here in the area, and I don't want to just single out this part of the community. I
Mm.
want everybody has had an experience, their story in their life. I want to hear
Mm.
all of them. I want to hear different ones for different racial identities, for immigrants, for if we listen to more people's stories, I think we would be a lot more empathetic to them because
True.
it's only through storytelling that we can understand what other people have been through. And we don't know because we just have our experience, the story of us.
Mm.
But when you asked me for story, I had one right there. And I don't know if you've read it
Yes.
yet, but it was a story about being a boy in the cafeteria and sitting at the girls' table. Uh, I'll tell that story sometimes and people will just and this is what I love when they stop and say, "Huh, I never really thought about that."
Mm.
It's very hard for me to understand the
Mm.
identity of a black person and what they've been through, and it's very
Mm.
hard for a cisgender person that is that everything matches the brain and the body. Just in case any of the listeners don't know, it's hard for them to understand what it would feel like if it was two different things,
Mm.
and that's just what I want to help people understand, and I do that a
Yeah.
lot with stories.
Yeah. Storytelling is so powerful. I
It
love it.
is.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see your anthology you're working on.
Yes, yeah, and thank you for sending in your story. I did read it. It is a while ago now, and things
Yeah,
are like time is so weird at the moment. So I just keep feeling like something that's 3 weeks ago feels like it could be 3 months ago. I don't know anymore.
I know. You're
So
right. That's the way
yeah,
time goes, it seems like.
it is the way at the moment. Yes.
People will tell me, "We're gonna do this in August," and I think, "That's tomorrow," basically, for
Yeah,
us.
pretty much, pretty much. Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate you sending that in, and yeah, I'm still accepting submissions for
Good.
the anthology, so that's
Yeah,
great. I did set the submission date for the end of Pride Month, which is June.
yeah.
However, I could, I do sometimes have to push it forward a little bit, and I would still love to receive more stories. So that's wonderful. Yeah. So, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to add?
Let's see. I can't really think of it. I would tell your audience, people, all of us need support of one another.
Mm.
There's a lot of anger out there. It's manufactured anger. There's a lot of lies out there about different parts of the community. And that's not how we're going to move forward in this world. And I'm a true believer in that we have to evolve to get to a better place. And right now, maybe very strong, but reach out to those people who might be different from you and just have a conversation with them. Tell them you support them.
Mm.
I don't think that can be stressed enough because there's so much pressure on almost everybody right now out there. And yeah, let's just remember. I will just say it: the Beatles song, "All You Need Is Love." And I don't want to respond with hate. I have my opinions, but it's we can't keep fighting wars that are unnecessary. And
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of a a way I think that I could just wrap this whole thing up is just
Mm.
listen to each other and let's support one another, and that goes for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. As they say, well, you can't fight fire with fire. Any
No,
firefighter would tell you
yeah,
that, probably.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
yeah.
yeah, that's well
Mm.
said. Anything
Yeah.
you want to know from me?
Oh, good question.
Any question? I'm pretty open book.
Gosh, let me think if I can think of any more questions. Hmm. Okay, so how do you envision not the rest of your life playing out, but like what is your intention for life? Because I mean, you seeing you now and seeing your pictures on the website, you really like you sort of glow and you radiate, what you talk about. You
Yeah.
really do. So I can only imagine how different it was, before you came out and transitioned. So yeah, how do you envision the rest of your life?
I love that question. Enough people don't ask me that question. I guess a lot of people don't know how old I am because it's so different. I used to look so much older. I drinking all that and being overweight. I had this really thick, leathery skin. And I always tell men, I say, if you just put a little lotion on there, it's amazing. But people, will say, "Oh, are you thinking about retirement?" And I'll tell them, "Well, I'm 61 and I do not plan on stopping." I think one of the great things about being a speaker is that you can literally do this for I don't know. We've got speakers that are in their 80s in the National Speakers Association here.
Mhm.
And I think it's interesting that they found what they love to do. And for me, I said, no matter what I make, I'm going to keep doing this because I feel like this is my gift. This is my passion. And I don't want to go back to doing spreadsheets anymore. I will just do this for as long as I am able. And my current wife and we have the most wonderful relationship. She loves unconditionally, and it's amazing because I never had unconditional love like she gives me. And I'm going to be with her, and I will be talking as long as I can. As Shrek said about Donkey, the problem is not getting him to talk; it's getting him to shut up. I feel that should be her, as in me.
Ah.
And but my wife is very patient with me, so she doesn't talk that much, but yeah, I want to just keep doing this. I do.
Mhm.
And I think things will change over the next few years. I mean, transgender people have been around since the dawn of time. There's plenty of evidence for that throughout history. And where it's not something that's going to disappear. And I think eventually people will see that. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we stay relevant and that our voices are heard. And then maybe one day I won't even have to go out and talk about this. I can
That's
talk
the aim,
about
isn't it? Yeah.
traveling or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. So we're a long way and we've taken a step back, but I'm going to
Mm.
continue to push forward and do this for the rest of my life because I finally found something that I love to do.
Amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing, Deanna.
Thank you, Esther. It's been a joy talking to you.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Deanna, where you can also read the transcript, and you can find Deanna on her website, deannajones.com. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com, as in FIFTY, on social media and on YouTube. Again, to support the podcast, visit the website to make a donation, join our community, find out more about our gender diversity and allyship workshops and courses, and how to contribute your gender story to the Anthology of Hope, for which we are accepting submissions now. Visit 50shadesofgender.com/hope for more information. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.